We Germans love our cars, we love the Autobahn. The automotive industry is like the church to us, and of course, if that's the case, we also have a pope. And here you can see some videos of our German automotive pope. That's how we call him, Ferdinand Dudenhofer. He's frequently in the TV whenever there's an expert on the automotive industry needed, and he has actually been also quite critical on the German automotive industry. So usually I just tell you my personal views here on this channel, but this time I'm gonna tell you what the German Pope of Automotive has to say around China as well as battery swapping. So first, let me go through this article that I've shared a while ago in the Patreon network, which was around an event by the London School of Economics, and it was asking experts, is China winning the electric vehicle race? First off, the interesting thing about Dudenhofer is that he has been involved in various consulting projects within the automotive industry. He knows quite a bit about China as well, because China is just so important for the German car industry in specific. And he has always been kind of a third-party institution in a way, as he is really independent. And so he was usually saying kind of a different narrative to what you would see by the media or politicians saying, particularly actually also on the topic of Tesla and electric mobility, where he was very early to call what's going to happen with the automotive industry. So the first point he is making in this LSE talk is that China is the largest car market in the world, and this is only going to increase from 28% of all new cars sold worldwide, which will get to 32% by 2030. So this is giving China a big scale advantage. Second, and this shows his great industry and macro views here, he is mentioning the fact that China has most models in the market, so from very small mini EVs till the very premium to luxury segment. EVs in China are filling all of the market segments. The third point he mentions regarding China is that China has a leading position regarding the lithium-ion batteries. We come back to that one later. And so this is why he says the heart of the EV beats in China, because they have companies like CATL, BYD, S-Volt and so on, which have leading positions next to Korean manufacturers. The fourth point he makes is around the Chinese government, which is mainly about the CO2 emissions targets that China has set, notably also in their 5 years plans, but also by the speeches of Xi Jinping. And this is why essentially EVs are playing such an important role within the agenda of China. The fifth point that he mentions is around a comprehensive program for charging infrastructure in China, and here for the first time he also manages the battery swapping technology by car makers like NIO, and we'll get there in a second. Next, he mentions that more traditional car manufacturers, just like BYD, Geely or Great Wall, are making huge steps towards e-mobility, but that there's also those vibrant startups like NIO, Xpeng, Li Auto and others. So the bottom line is clear, these macro topics are the reasons why he thinks that China is leading the race, and it's only the question who will become second. So this context is kind of the prelude to what Dudenhofer has to say to the German automotive industry and why he thinks that battery swapping could be actually something worthwhile and interesting to watch. Because just the other day he published this article around Batteriewechselstationen für Elektroautos. China setzt einen neuen Standard. So battery swapping stations for EVs, China is setting new standards. And so this article is obviously in German, but I will give you the most important bits. It's starting actually out around all of the negative aspects around battery swapping. How the startup Better Place, who initially started it, went actually bankrupt. He mentions how Tesla and the Volkswagen Group, as well as the other German car manufacturers, are not interested in the battery swapping technology, and that there are different technical obstacles towards battery swapping, like the improved charging times, notably Porsche with the 800 volt technology, as well as that we can expect improved range of batteries over time. He also mentions how Tesla is using it as a technology advancement, that they will integrate the battery into the chassis of the vehicle. And so his conclusion is that under normal circumstances, battery swapping actually has no chance for a breakthrough. Now, coming back to what Dudenhofer said around China and the importance that is playing in the EV field, he continues with this article around battery swapping technologies and some insights around China. He's basically saying because China has this big domestic market, they can kind of rule the standards to which EVs are going to happen. And he also says that China is not only focused on the inside of what's happening in China, the domestic market, but actually has global aspirations. So they can leverage a couple of things like having the domestic battery producers like CATL. They have huge advantages when it comes to data and insight and the infrastructure connected to 5G internet. And so this paves the way for placing battery swapping stations in different areas and creating an entirely whole different ecosystem, which in China clearly has the advantages that the grid can actually use those battery swap stations to load and charge the batteries overnight, and using those stations for the charging but also for demand peaks. He mentions the innovation potential in the combination of EVs, robo-taxis as well as swapping stations, which should come with benefits such as that the robo-taxis can be swapped quicker and thereby be longer in service, less cars needed on the roads. And so this kind of infrastructure investment could have, from a macro and city planner perspective, huge implications on the capacity and mobility demand within the city. Now, I have talked about most of these aspects here on the channel before, but basically they are now again repeated here in this article by somebody who's really well regarded in the industry. And he also points out that most of the Chinese car manufacturers are actually now starting to go into this battery swapping direction. And so by the end of the article, he is kind of asking the question whether or not it is a mistake that in Europe and the US we don't see similar projects. And he's asking the question that similar to the lithium-ion batteries where China has invested early and ultimately benefited during the EV revolution now, battery swapping might be a case where the EU Commission and the German government is just falling behind and where we possibly are missing out on implementing our own standards. He's even saying from a German perspective, the history repeats with Silicon Valley, where Amazon, Facebook and Google and Tesla have actually set the standards, but this time it is happening under Chinese flag because the sheer size of the market is setting the standards. And there is some truth to it, although manufacturers like Audi are saying like they just want to invest in a good charging infrastructure and they don't see the battery swapping as economically feasible and so on, which he in the beginning of the article, Dudenhofer said the same, right? So under the right circumstances, battery swapping wouldn't have a chance. But now he points out like the market size and the standardization and infrastructure build out. How can this really enforce new things to happen? So the German automotive industry is very, very dependent on China. 40% of the revenues is coming from China. And so whether or not you are adopting your models to this new standard and whether or not it's already too late now to develop their own standards and China is already setting the terms here, this might be one of the biggest questions going forward into the next years for the German automotive industry, but possibly even on a global level. So let me know down in the comments whether or not you think that the German automotive industry is making a mistake here by not adopting this technology or developing their own standard in this regard. And then, yeah, see you in the next one and thank you guys for watching.